Hey everybody, it's PartyElite, and today we're finally taking another look at Manor Lords, the extremely hotly anticipated historical city builder slash strategy game. Now I've been following Manor Lords for quite some time now, and you'll find my previous video about it linked in the pinned comment down below if you want more details and gameplay footage. Since that video release though, I've remained extremely excited about the game with the constant flow of screenshots and conversation from the developer across all social channels, but this weekend we saw a huge update with regards to what's to come, what's changed, and what it all means. Now, I don't typically do development update videos, but this one's a big one, and if you want more videos like this for Manor Lords or other indie strategy titles, hit the like button down below and let me know in the comments. And don't hesitate to subscribe if you like strategy games in general. That is typically my primary focus on the channel. Now, with timestamps down below to help you navigate through the video, and with no more time to waste, let's begin. Revamped City-Building. The city-building mechanics were already pretty interesting when we last looked at Manor Lords, going for a more organic feel. It felt a lot more realistic than games that rely on a hard grid, especially in this era. Now this system has since been upgraded in a few ways, the first of which focuses on residential plots inspired by burgage plots. These were deep but narrow plots of land that, if memory serves, became the norm in Great Britain and Ireland by the 13th century, though they date back a few more centuries than that when they first started forming. These plots were typically rented by freemen for a monthly fee, with a home facing the street, and the land behind the home used to generate income for the renter through a variety of means: subletting, craftsmanship, so on and so forth. I could talk about burgage plots for a long time. They were a very important development, and they're the same for the game too, as you can see here in this clip, where making residential plots now involves placing 4 points and then the game automatically subdividing the plot into subplots using the logic behind burgage plots to determine their exact size and depth and all the little details. Now you can choose the facing of the plot, and if you've left enough room, the backyard area will have anything from a chicken coop to goat sheds to vegetable gardens, all sorts of stuff. Now this creates a bit of variety, and alongside the way that the plot actually conforms to a nearby road when you place the plot, we're seeing again something very organic and much more believable for the era. A new placement system is being introduced to the market square as well. It used to be just a matter of placing individual stalls, with each stall selling a single item, but that led to awkward placement later in the game. Instead, now, the central well that determines the middle of the town will have individual attachable modules, allowing you to control how the central market looks, creating a better overall look and feel without sacrificing function or form as the game progresses. And as your game progresses, you'll eventually see the aforementioned residential plots upgrade too, becoming bigger and more impressive structures, but with the developing late game, a key issue needed to be tackled. Late-game resource production buildings like bakeries, breweries, blacksmiths, tailors, and cobblers always ended up along the outskirts of a well-developed town. To avoid this, we're going to see the introduction of what's being called artisan conversion. This approach will allow you to upgrade high-level residential plots into artisans' workshops, such as the ones I mentioned earlier, and that means the peasants that are living in the residence become permanently attached to that job, but these structures can remain close to the center of your town despite being late-game additions. This is a great way to tackle the issue of needing to demolish highly leveled residential buildings to make room for artisans, and it also encourages upgraded residential plots in more ways than the usual. The dev diary also talks about how the regional divisions have changed over time, from being largely symbolic to more realistic subdivisions of a larger map, and there's not too much to see here in terms of what's new, but it is some interesting insight with regards to how this system has developed in response to feedback from the community. Separately, the dev diary talks about how the maps are all handcrafted, and to avoid multiple playthroughs ending up looking the same, underground water veins have been introduced. Wells need to be placed on these veins, and since wells act as town centers, this should encourage towns that look very different even on the same map. But I am a little curious exactly how that works. If the water veins are also hand-placed, doesn't that mean the same spots might still be the ideal and so the repeatedly used starting spots? Is the underground water layer randomized to encourage some variety above ground? I'm not exactly sure. Time will tell, but I am very curious to see exactly how this works. Now, on the topic of overlays though, we have also seen some talk of soil fertility overlays and how different soil is better for different crops, and how crop rotation has an impact on yield and fertility. It's all very interesting stuff that should make even the simple act of farming a bit more involved, even though it will be semi-automated. Moving on though, let's take a look at the visual upgrades. As many of you may have noticed, the loosely defined time frame of the game has, so far, resulted in a bit of a visual mishmash as far as historicity is concerned. To overcome that, Manor Lords is now narrowing its timeline and geography down to 14th century Franconia. Now, it's important to note that the game still refers to itself as inspired by history. That is to say, there will still be some anachronistic elements, but it'll be a lot neater than it was previously. Collaborating with a member of the Manor Lords Discord, the eclectic mix of Anglo-Saxon, French, and Tudor architecture has been replaced with a Southern Germanic style, and the future art direction should now have better parameters to stick to as well. Buildings weren't the only visual upgrades, though. Characters, from armor to fingers to facial hair, have all got some love and attention too. With the help of a few more members of the Discord, we're seeing historically accurate armor progression as troops upgrade over time, and we're also seeing a character artist from Kingdom Come Deliverance getting involved with making armor and clothing, so that's definitely going to give us some eye candy. There's also some talk about how deep learning AI is being used to generate faces, which are then being modeled into 3D, a technically and technologically interesting approach, and it translates to more variety in faces for our peasants and soldiers, as textures, models, and hair variations mix and match. Now, on the brief mention of soldiers there, I'm going to take the opportunity to segue into military matters. So fighting battles has undergone some significant changes since we first saw footage of the game. Where in 2020 all the soldiers were mercenaries and battles were kept significantly smaller, things have now escalated in this department due to feedback that made it clear. People want to send their peasants to fight. Now, it's important to remember that this is still not a total war game. I just want to temper expectations there because I feel like people are getting a little carried away with that line of conversation, partly because titles like Total War Killer and Is This Game the New Medieval Total War get clicks on YouTube, and I wouldn't be surprised if I've mistakenly added fuel to that conversation myself in the past without realizing it. So, to be clear, I wouldn't expect massive multi-thousand plus person battles where both sides are fielding 3,000 soldiers and duking it out on massive maps, but we are still going to see a very good slew of battle mechanics, tactics, and strategies, perhaps some of the deepest we've seen in a very long time in a strategy game. We've seen infantry pushing and pulling, we've seen cavalry charges, we've seen archers, we've seen melee with various weapons, we've seen upgraded equipment having a visual impact, we've seen upgraded equipment having an actual mechanical impact, we've seen height advantages playing a part in battle, we've seen the impact of weather, we've seen different formations, different melee modes, different ranged firing modes, and the town's production output having a direct impact on what equipment is actually available for soldiers. So while the troop counts might be lower than a Total War game, we're still seeing some very impressive systems, and to be crystal clear, I'm still just as excited by this aspect of the game, and I do think you should be too. I just wanted to help realign this conversation that I've been seeing out there to be a bit more in keeping with what I think is actually likely and what the actual goal is of Manor Lords. To that end though, we're going to be seeing a town militia as well as a personal retinue. The personal retinue can be customized and specialized quite a bit, but you'll also be able to upgrade the armor on an individual basis, which will add some more personality and variety on the battlefield, and furthermore, you won't be able to specify exact equipment, allowing for more variety as people bring their own armor sets and equipment when they join up. It's more authentic, and authenticity seems to be the name of the game here. You'll eventually be able to specialize the retinue, but even then, you'll pick broad categories of equipment rather than specifics. And what's great is that the upgraded coat of arms and banner creator allows you to add your own visual touch to your military and town alike. Combat itself is also seeing the addition of sync kills, though the devs are being careful that they don't take too long to avoid those awkward moments when soldiers are kind of looking around while battle rages on, waiting for their animation to kick in. It always looks a little funny, so they are keeping that in mind. And whether it's sync kills or just regular combat animations, it sounds like it's all motion captured, so we should be seeing some pretty fluid battle animations. Slightly tangentially, the game has also seen an improvement to how it'll tackle rebellions. Rather than simply losing control of a region when its happiness drops to -100, you're instead going to see part of the population split off, become brigands, and loot and raid and set buildings alight, which your peasants will then in turn try to put out using water from the wells. But enough about war. Let's switch gears to commerce, trade, and wealth. Let's start with the backbone of a town here: farming. Evidently, farming used to be very micro-intensive, needing you to assign, unassign, and reassign peasants based on work that needed doing. From plowing to sowing and harvesting to storage at a barn, there were too many moving parts, and now it's been reduced to a single central farm building that automatically assigns tasks to peasants employed at said building. You'll still be able to specify what fields are growing what crop and which ones are more or less important, but at the end of the day, a newly developed AI system will actually dole out the tasks as needed. Apparently, there was a bit of feedback against the use of ox plows as well, and while they've been replaced with hand plows for now, the ox might be reintroduced differently in the future. I personally hope they find a home in Manor Lords. Now, just because the ox is gone doesn't mean we can't have other livestock though. It sounds like a previously unrealistic system where sheep would simply spawn out of thin air at the appropriate building has been replaced a couple of times actually. So at first, livestock traders would just march through towns, creating occasional traffic jams in narrow streets, and then they would sell their livestock to you. That was then replaced with a livestock trader building where a trader manages the import and export of animals. Now, I'm not sure how this will look visually, but it sounds like there will no longer be traveling herds of sheep with their shepherds, and they'll perhaps spawn at this building instead. I can't be sure, but I'll keep my eyes peeled for confirmation. It's certainly a better system than a sheep farm where sheep randomly show up, because now there's trade going on, even if it's visually obfuscated. At the moment, sheep age over time, so you can buy lambs if you want to make long-term investments, or you can buy older sheep if you need something more urgently over a shorter term. It's interesting to see, and it sounds like more management features will be introduced to livestock in due time. I'm curious as well to see what other animals are in the works too. We've heard about chicken coops, screenshots still include cows, and I'm sure there's a decent variety to pick from which will remain realistic to the era and space. Again here, time will tell. Now, the import and export of livestock isn't the only trade that'll be happening though, and it isn't the only trade system that's been changed around either. The import and export of other goods used to rely on two separate buildings: a trading post where workers would import goods from other regions, and a market stall where foreign merchants would come to buy stuff from time to time if you're lucky. Though this system added a bit of competitiveness where you needed to attract merchants to your town as opposed to other towns on the map, it made the whole process cumbersome. These two buildings have been replaced by a new system where you can set how each good will be prioritized for import and export, targeted stock to retain, and preferred destinations to send them to. Your workers will then handle the tasks based on your instruction, and this system retains the importance of attractiveness, as sending your own peasants off to sell exports is more time-consuming than simply attracting foreign merchants to come pick them up instead. It sounds like quite the clever solution to me, and I'm glad they were able to hold on to the attractiveness angle, because that just adds a bit of variety that I don't think I've seen in any other game like this before. Either way, with all this money flowing, you can expect it to have an impact on your town. Previously, as with most city-building games, you'd have been able to upgrade all your housing as long as their needs were met, and it would lead to rather homogeneous-looking towns where all the buildings were leveled up to the maximum level. A new system here now relies on the idea of wealth propagation, where goods sold at the market push the generated wealth out to nearby houses, presumably implying that the sellers at the market are the nearest residents, I suppose. In this way, you'll see richer neighborhoods and poorer neighborhoods based on market placement and activity, as buildings can only be upgraded if they've accumulated enough wealth over time. The system is still being fine-tuned, as it seems to be causing some confusion among current testers, but I quite like the sound of it, and it might just be a matter of UI that clearly communicates when upgrading is or isn't available. Either way, it should introduce some much-needed hierarchy to our towns, and I think it'll look absolutely stunning when it all comes together, at least based on these screenshots we're seeing so far. Alpha testing, release timeline, and more. Finally, it's worth noting that alpha testing applications are now open, and you can find the instructions for applying in the description down below, taken right from the game's Steam page. Keep in mind that this is an alpha, so that means the game is in a very unfinished state, and applicants should expect a rough experience. This is an opportunity to provide feedback based on hands-on experience and engage in conversation with other excited and invested individuals. The devs have been ridiculously open to feedback just on social media alone, based purely on people's thoughts and opinions and feelings, so I'm really excited to see this initiative and where it leads the game. Naturally, with the game only just starting alpha testing, the actual release is quite a ways away. Maybe next year, and if so, I imagine it would be super late next year, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's actually early the year after instead, but that's all speculation. Between an epic mega grant and a publishing deal with Hooded Horse, there's a lot more money to make all of it come together now, and don't worry, the epic mega grant has nothing to do with the Epic Game Store, it's just for using Unreal Engine 5, so we should be seeing a broad set of release platforms on PC when the time finally comes. Now, there were a few other elements discussed in the blog post too, but they're a bit more technical and a bit harder to showcase, I suppose. There's been an entire rework of how sound works in the game, technically speaking, and we're also going to be seeing an OST that will give Manor Lords its own unique music, looking for a cinematic but also authentic vibe. The AI has been constantly reworked to be able to use the newly developed systems, and there are minor fixes happening all the time, of course. The old system of dirt paths being organically formed is out the window as it was too messy, and there's been some reorganizing of resources as well, particularly when it comes to wood. Some of this stuff is still quite up for debate and change and exploration, so if you want to read up on it, check out the link I've included in the description down below, and again, don't forget to sign up for the alpha if you're interested. And of course, if you're interested in Manor Lords, don't hesitate to add it to your wishlist. It really helps independent developers out, especially since it pushes their game out to more people might end up finding it, and it just, I'm sure, is a great motivation boost as well. If you enjoyed this video, don't hesitate to hit that like button down below, and for more strategy gaming coverage, again, feel free to subscribe to the channel as that tends to be my focus around these parts, and you know what, it's a big motivator for me too. I'm really looking forward to Manor Lords, and if you have any thoughts of your own, share them in the comments down below. I'd be excited to talk about the game. For a look at other games coming out in the near future that you might like, check out the video I've linked on screen right now, and as always, a massive thanks goes out to all of the channel members and patrons who've been supporting the channel on a monthly basis. Y'all keep us alive and running smoothly, and of course, a big ol' thanks goes out to each and every one of you for watching. Until next time, cheers.